And if you discontinue the SSRI abruptly from one day to the next, you're basically creating a tremendous neurotransmitter imbalance. Because again, several 5-HT receptors might upregulate. Some of them might still stay downregulated for weeks or months. Now, when you look at the graph of fluvoxamine plasma concentrations, serum concentrations, and the amount of SERT occupancy that you get, the serotonin reuptake transporter, more on that later, you see that it goes up quite steeply and then starts to taper off. So that means at higher dosages, you get less SERT occupancy compared to lower dosages. And this seems to be the case for most of the SSRIs and antidepressants. The more you take, the less SERT occupancy you get comparatively to lower dosages. So that means that you have to taper the dose down slowly and allowing your SERT occupancy to come down slowly as well. And this can be done with 10%, 15% reductions. This is what most people that have a lot of experience with SSRI and the withdrawal period recommend. But I stopped cold turkey. So I went from basically 90% SERT occupancy to 0. So what happens is that a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, they block the serotonin reuptake transporter and prevent the reuptake pump from reabsorbing the serotonin. So now there's a lot of serotonin present within the synapses. And then as the serotonin concentrations within the synapses increase, many of the 5-hydroxytryptamine receptors actually downregulate. Now there's many different kinds of 5-HT receptors fulfilling all kinds of physiological functions. The 5-HT1 actually has 5 subtypes, A to F, and then 5-HT2 has 2 subtypes, and the other ones also have subtypes. So there's many different receptors involved in this process. And now these receptors get stimulated and downregulated in different capacities, resulting in the overall beneficial effects that we generally associate with selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. But if you phase out the SSRIs, some of these 5-HT receptors upregulate faster than others. And if you discontinue the SSRI abruptly from one day to the next, you're basically creating a tremendous neurotransmitter imbalance. Because again, several 5-HT receptors might upregulate. Some of them might still stay downregulated for weeks or months after discontinuing that particular SSRI. And it's different for every different kind of SSRI that's out there. That's why it's generally recommended to phase out these SSRIs over time with 10%, maybe 20% reductions. And some people would be better off phasing from one SSRI into a next one. Now, there's a lot of different protocols that there's no cookie cutter way to really recommend how to phase off SSRIs. I would highly recommend a website called survivingdepressants.org. I'll link it down below. That's basically a talk group where a lot of people come together that used SSRIs for years or decades, or maybe even their entire life, and share their experience on how to phase out and come off particular antidepressants and what they felt was beneficial, what didn't work, what side effects they experienced, how to mitigate some of these side effects. But it's a very tight-knit community where people actively share what's working and what's not working. And I think if you want to come off SSRIs, just like I did, you'll find a lot more information there compared to what I can possibly present in this YouTube video. I went through a lot of the threads there regarding fluvoxamine and withdrawal. And basically, long story short, you should taper off and you should give yourself some time. So I didn't taper off. I went cold turkey. And now after about a month or so, I can say that most of the side effects, the brain zaps, the irritability, the anger management, and perhaps sleeping a little bit longer than intended, but that could also be due to the time zone difference. I mean, basically, America is the opposite time zone of Thailand. And when I was there, I was just running around nonstop, meeting fans and doing my holiday stuff. So I didn't really get an opportunity to sleep much there. And then you come back to Thailand, back to a pile of work that needs to be done. So I've been working nonstop, trying to get as much work done as possible while simultaneously dealing with the time zone difference. So you work all day and then you suddenly crash and you sleep for what? Maybe 9 to 10, sometimes 12 hours per day. So luckily, all of those side effects for me are slowly phasing out and going away. The irritability and agitation, that's something that I'll just have to manage going forward, just like I managed that for the majority of my life. Let's say from, puberty, 13, 15 years old up until 39-year-old when I started experimenting with fluvoxamine, or 38 years old last year. I'll do my best to keep a lid on it and look at the situation objectively before I go into a rambling tangent and make myself intolerable for my wife. It's basically you objectify what's going on. You take a step back. I've gotten quite good at this, now turning close to 40. You look at the situation, you take a step out of the situation, and you look at it as an observer. You turn that situation into a statue, you walk out of it, you look at it objectively, you realize that you're a rambling lunatic, and then you reel that stuff right back in and try to address the situation a little bit more composed. So that's what I've been trying to do for the last couple of weeks now. It was undoable using 5-HTP supplementation, but now that I take a step back from that and discontinued it, it's actually quite easy. So objectively, I try to manage my anger that way. Same as you manage the pain during a working set or the difficult issues that might arise during your life. Takes a little bit of mental maturity. And again, I might still get caught in a rambling madness, but I try to keep that to a minimum. Now, how does SSRI withdrawal compare to something like post-cycle therapy or the withdrawal period from certain recreational drugs? Personally, I don't have experience with withdrawal periods of recreational drugs. And even though I dabbled aplenty in my younger years, I never got addicted. So I really don't have any experience with being addicted to alcohol or weed or cocaine or other stimulants or other recreational drugs. I experimented. I enjoyed the time running a particular experiment, and then I would move over to the next experiment and never touch that drug for maybe a year or a couple months or whatever, right? I would alternate my experiments and drugs during that phase of my life, which has now been long since closed. So I do have extensive experience with post-cycle therapy, though. I came off cycle 4 times already, so that's 4 times the experience as fluvoxamine withdrawal. I came off steroids first time after 16 weeks, second time was 4 or 5 months. Then the third time, one of my more recent PCTs was after taking steroids for a decade. That one was rough, but it was kind of forced because I had non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and I wanted to get that resolved because I knew I wasn't going to focus on my bodybuilding during that time. So why take steroids if you're not going to be a 100% full-time bodybuilder? So I came off cycle. I was off cycle for 9 months. I resolved the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I rechecked my fertility parameters, which will all be documented when I get to the overall documentation of my fertility parameters in the future. So that all turned out well. That PCT was easier than I thought it would be. And then recently I did a period without steroids and then doing some sort of makeshift PCT with Gorilla Sigma and fake ACG that I had. So that was a bit of a, failed experiment, but still my testosterone levels came back to, what was it? 420 nanograms per deciliter? No pun intended. I haven't touched weed in over a decade. So take your 420 jokes someplace else. Or you can post them in the comment section. Those really help with the algorithm. So by all means, 420 jokes go down below. That was where my levels ended up at, which is not bad after considering I only took Gorilla Sigma for a month without the proper PCT during that time. So out of those 4 post-cycle therapies, I would say that was a much easier thing to endure compared to this last month of fluvoxamine withdrawal. And even though I only highlighted the irritability, the agitation, and the brain zaps, I think the overall feeling that I have, I just feel less of a quality of a person than I was running fluvoxamine. And that's just all things considering. It's like the last month I didn't really like who I was. Whereas with post-cycle therapy, okay, you're tired, your libido goes down, you get fat, you get soft, right? All those trivial little things that have to do with your physique. You walk past the mirror, you look small, tiny, you want to wear a big shirt, even though you live in Thailand and it's way too hot to wear a big shirt. So you're just going to have to expose yourself and the lack of muscularity to the outside world and then, deal with all of the jokes. Are you sick? You have cancer? You got HIV, Steve, or you're so small, right? Blah, 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 blah. After 4 PCTs, I'm kind of used to it. And I always realized that during a PCT, even though the muscularity and then, the bodybuilding shape is going away, I'm still me. I'm still a businessman and a husband and the father of 6 cats, etc. Right? So PCT never really fazed me. I know it might be very, very difficult for some guys out there, but for me, honestly, I'm totally at peace with subclinical testosterone levels. Of course, not for too long, but it just gives me ease of mind. And again, the agitation and irritability and the things I kind of hate about myself, being, born with these genetics, seems to be non-existent. But honestly, for me, having androgen deficiency is just another method to get a long-term vacation from these psychological issues that I was born with, that I've had since childhood, as long as I can remember. So I kind of welcome that period. It really puts my thoughts and emotions back in order. And I was able to get the same thing out of fluvoxamine. That's why I liked it so much and ran it for almost a year straight. But going from having that under control to zero, having no control of those emotions, man, it really made me reconsider my goals. I had a long discussion with my wife a couple days into it. Maybe, babe, I should go back on fluvoxamine. Babe, it's very hard for me to control my agitation and temper tantrums. Babe, should I get back on fluvoxamine and just bite the bullet and taper it off slowly over the next 6 months or so? So I'm lucky. I'm very happy that I persisted through this period. But I think this fluvoxamine withdrawal, the last month was not easy. I'll be honest. It was way worse than PCT. And how does it compare to like horrible periods in your life, like your parents divorcing or getting a broken leg or, man, all the things I don't really want to mention on this YouTube channel? Those are way worse. So in that sense, SSRI withdrawal or fluvoxamine withdrawal is like going to Disneyland, it's a walk in the park compared to really difficult periods in your life. But it was difficult the last month. And I'm sure going forward, it's going to be difficult, but easier to cope with. Hopefully going forward. So if I seem a little bit off sometimes, that's just the fluvoxamine withdrawal. I've always been off, but not off to that extent. I mean, to be fair, I don't experience any of these horrible side effects that other people on the forums that I read about experience. I mean, that's way worse. Some of the people have withdrawal for months or years, even after tapering fluvoxamine or other SSRIs down slowly with 10% increments. And using these little micro dosages by suspending the fluvoxamine or SSRIs in liquid and then coming down with 1 milligram every week or every couple of weeks. What I experienced is, again, a walk in the park compared to what other people experienced. Could be because I'm quite resilient to drug withdrawal. I mean, PCT for me is not a big issue. Coming down of recreational drugs was never really an issue for me years ago. Hangovers I can deal with no problem in the, blue moon that I have a hangover. And even though SSRI withdrawal was, I would say from all the drug experiences that I've had over the last couple of years was one of the hardest. It's still not as difficult compared to what other people experience. And it's certainly not as difficult as, having your parents divorce when you're 15 years old. So I always keep that in perspective. I look at the situation. How bad I feel now. Could I feel a lot worse? I certainly could, right? So, and those periods are luckily behind me, and I'm very thankful that I was able to survive through those periods and build a little bit of character. It might be different for somebody who's not gone through hell and back, sort of say, and then have to go through SSRI withdrawal. If that's your first rodeo, then it's going to be rough. I wouldn't recommend this period that I had over the last month onto anybody else. Just keep in mind that you're not the only one who's going through this withdrawal period. There's hundreds, if not thousands of people out there that share their experiences on several of these forums, one of which I'll link down below. So if you need some help, please go there, right? Because every situation is unique. Every situation will require a particular approach. I'm just here sharing my experiences. So if you need some guidance along the way, please go to those forums and discuss it with people there who are also going through that period that is lasting, weeks or months or years for them as well. Just keep in mind that slowly with time, it does get better. So that's something you have to realize, right? Every period in your life is going to be temporary. Some of those are going to be filled with extreme highs. And unfortunately, as nature is cruel, you're also going to go through periods that are going to be filled with extreme lows. You build a lot of character along the way, as I am doing right now, because my anger management compared to 2 weeks ago now is certainly a lot better. So I'll leave it here. That's enough rambling from me. Thank you guys so much. You can find everything that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description. My sponsors, my affiliates, how to get into contact with me for consultations, the ebooks that I have on my website. And now Also, the Patreon account, so I can hire an editor and I can spend a little bit more time making content and less time editing these videos together with this perfectionism and OCD tendencies that I have in the back of my head. Frame perfect editing, you know, Steve, it's not a speed run, bro. I keep telling this all the freaking time. You don't have to do frame perfect jumps or editing on YouTube. And yet, while I'm editing, that's exactly what's happening. So hopefully we can leave that up to the editor and then focus on content and, increase the production value of this YouTube channel for your guys' enjoyment. And for the Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys. Thank God Fluvoxamine withdrawal doesn't affect your gains. But if it did, it would certainly be a lot tougher. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.